Imagine a screen filled with glistening sweat, ragged clothes, and the raw, unfiltered intimacy of human desperation. The camera lingers on every breath, every trembling limb, and every moment of physical vulnerability, pushing the boundaries of what is allowed to be shown. No, this isn't a description of an adult film. This is survival cinema that was once broadcast on primetime television. Welcome to the world of survival exploitation, a genre that sold itself on the edge of forbidden pleasure and primal terror. Today, we are stripping away the layers of film history to reveal the most provocative archives ever made, movies where the heat was real, the clothes were optional, and the only goal was to stay alive. Number 10. The Island of the Fishmen, 1979. We start our countdown with a journey to a remote Caribbean island, where a group of shipwreck survivors discovers that the ocean hides secrets far more terrifying than a simple drowning. Directed by Sergio Martino, this film is a masterclass in blending Victorian-era adventure with the raw, unsettling imagery of late 70s exploitation. The premise is classic. A doctor and a group of prisoners find themselves stranded on an uncharted land governed by a mysterious nobleman. But they soon realize they are being hunted by amphibious humanoids, the Fishmen. What puts this film on our list is how it utilizes the physical vulnerability of its cast. The survival here is tactile. You feel the humidity of the swamps and the claustrophobia of the jungle. The film constantly teases the viewer with the contrast between the high society elegance of the island's villa and the primal, mud-caked reality of the survivors fighting for their lives outside its walls. It pushes the survival or provocation boundary by focusing intently on the physical struggle of its female lead, Barbara Bach, as she navigates a landscape filled with both monsters and men who have lost their humanity. It's a humid, neon-soaked nightmare that proves survival is often a very messy business. Number 9. Slave of the Cannibal God, 1978. Moving to number 9, we encounter one of the most infamous entries in the entire genre. Starring the legendary Ursula Andress, this film takes the naked and dangerous trope to its absolute limit. The story follows a woman who travels into the heart of the New Guinea jungle to find her missing husband, only to be captured by a primitive cult that views her as a literal deity. This isn't just a survival movie, it's an endurance test for the audience. Director Sergio Martino strips away the comforts of civilization, both literally and figuratively. As Ursula Andress's character is dragged deeper into the jungle, her journey becomes a harrowing descent into animalistic survival. The film is notorious for its unflinching depiction of the environment, the heat, the insects, and the raw brutality of the tribal rituals. It perfectly encapsulates the survival or porn dilemma, because the camera lingers on the protagonist's suffering and exposure with a voyeuristic intensity that was shocking for the era. It forces the viewer to ask if they are watching a story of human resilience or a calculated display of flesh and cruelty. It remains a polarizing, visceral piece of cinema that defined the jungle hell subgenre. Coming in at number 8 is a film that strips the survival genre down to its most abstract and haunting essentials. Directed by Losey, Figures in a Landscape is a psychological endurance test that ditches the typical jungle tropes for a stark, relentless pursuit across an unnamed, sun-scorched territory. The plot is deceptively simple. Two men, played by Robert Shaw and Malcolm McDowell, are fleeing across a brutal wilderness, hunted by a mysterious black helicopter that haunts the sky like a mechanical predator. There is no backstory, no explanation of their crimes, and no clear destination. There is only the hunt, the heat, and the agonizing physical decay of two men pushed to the very brink of their sanity. What makes this film take a significant leap in our survival or provocation scale is the sheer intimacy of the suffering. As the chase drags on, the protagonists are literally stripped of their dignity. Their clothes are torn away by thorns and jagged rocks, their skin is blistered by the unrelenting sun, and the camera lingers on every drop of sweat and every bloody scrape with a focus that feels almost invasive. It captures a specific kind of cinematic voyeurism, where the viewer is forced to watch the total breakdown of the human form. The dialogue is sparse, replaced by the heavy rhythmic breathing of exhausted men and the terrifying, omnipresent roar of the helicopter blades. It's a film that asks us to find beauty in the grotesque reality of a body falling apart under pressure. Losey creates a landscape that isn't just a setting, but an active participant in the torture of the characters, making the audience complicit in their struggle for every painful inch of ground. It is a masterpiece of minimalist tension that proves the most provocative thing a director can show is the raw, unadorned desperation of a human being with nowhere left to hide. Number 7. Turkey Shoot 1982 Brian Trenchard-Smith. At number 7, we trade the psychological tension for the pure, unadulterated carnage of the Australian exploitation scene. Also known as Escape 2000, this film takes the classic human hunting premise and turns it into a high-octane, blood-soaked spectacle of social decay. Set in a dystopian near future, a group of social deviants is sent to a brutal re-education camp where the only way to earn their freedom is to survive a hunt orchestrated by the camp's wealthy, sadistic elite. This isn't just a survival game. It's a systematic demolition of the human spirit, where the prey is hunted with everything from high-powered rifles to armored vehicles and even crossbows. The provocation in Turkey Shoot is relentless and unapologetic. Director Brian Trenchard-Smith pushes the visual boundaries of the era, focusing intensely on the physical degradation of the prisoners as they're chased through the dense, unforgiving brush. The film thrives on a naked and dangerous aesthetic, with the camera lingering on the sweat-slicked bodies and tattered clothing of the survivors as they face impossible odds. It perfectly hits the survival or porn dilemma by blending high-stakes action with a voyeuristic interest in the victim's suffering. Every encounter is charged with a raw, primal energy, highlighting the absolute vulnerability of the human skin against the machinery of a fascist state. The film doesn't just ask you to watch a hunt, it forces you to witness the total stripping away of civilization, leaving only the most desperate animalistic instincts on display. It remains a definitive masterpiece of the Ozploitation genre, proving that when the rules of society vanish, the only thing that matters is how much pain you can endure before you strike back. Number 6. Sweat and Fear, 1974. At number 6, we dive into the sweltering, claustrophobic world of Sweat and Fear, a film that epitomizes the dirty realism of the mid-70s Italian survival scene. Directed by the maestro of grit, Ruggero Deodato, this entry abandons the fantasy of heroics for a brutal, sun-drenched nightmare. The story centers on a group of people held captive in a remote, decaying villa under the thumb of sadistic kidnappers. There's no escape into the jungle here. The wilderness is the psychological and physical space between the walls, where the heat is constant and the tension is unbearable. Deodato's camera is notoriously unforgiving, lingering on the physical manifestations of fear in a way that feels intensely provocative. This is survival in its most stagnant and humid form. The characters are kept in a state of constant undress, their bodies glistening with a mixture of genuine sweat and grime, making the viewer feel the oppressive atmosphere of their confinement. The film pushes the survival or porn boundary by focusing on the erosion of the character's modesty as a tool of survival. As the days pass, the struggle isn't just to stay alive, but to maintain a shred of human dignity in an environment designed to strip it away. The provocation lies in the raw, almost documentary-like gaze of the lens, which captures every flinch and every moment of forced intimacy with a voyeuristic coldness. It's a grueling experience that turns the viewer into an unwanted witness to the total breakdown of social norms under the pressure of absolute, predatory power. By the time the violence finally erupts, it feels like a release from the suffocating carnal tension that has been building in every frame. Number 5. The Last Hunter, 1980. Moving to number 5, we find ourselves in the war-torn jungles of Southeast Asia with The Last Hunter. While ostensibly a Vietnam War film directed by the legendary Antonio Margheriti, it functions more as a high-octane survival horror where the enemy isn't just an army, but the environment itself. The protagonist is an elite soldier sent on a suicide mission behind enemy lines to silence a radio station broadcasting propaganda. However, the mission quickly dissolves into a primal fight for life as his squad is picked apart by invisible traps and a jungle that seems to be actively trying to consume them. Margheriti brings a distinct Euro spy flair to the carnage, infusing the survival elements with a dark, almost hallucinogenic energy. The film leans heavily into the physical toll of the jungle. The characters are constantly drenched, bloodied, and pushed to the limits of physical exhaustion. It earns its place on this list by how it eroticizes the violence of the landscape. The camera dwells on the vulnerability of the human body against the jagged bamboo and the murky leech-infested waters. There is a persistent sense of nakedness even when the characters are in uniform, a feeling that they are completely exposed to a world that wants to tear them open. The provocation here is found in the slick, high-contrast visual style that makes the suffering look disturbingly beautiful. It's a film that thrives on the aesthetic of the raw archive, blending the tropes of the war movie with the visceral, body-focused intensity of the exploitation era. It forces the audience to confront the thrill of the hunt and the dark magnetism of a world where civilization has been completely replaced by the law of the machete. This is survival cinema at its most polished and its most predatory, proving that in the heart of darkness, the line between hero and victim is non-existent. Number 4. Eaten Alive, 1980. At number 4, we encounter one of the most savage and controversial entries in the entire jungle survival subgenre. Directed by the maestro of grit, Umberto Lenzi, Eaten Alive is a relentless descent into a green hell, where the boundary between civilization and primal madness is completely erased. The story follows a young woman who travels into the deep New Guinea jungle to rescue her sister from a mysterious cult led by a charismatic yet lethal messiah. What follows is not a rescue mission, but a raw, agonizing struggle for life against both man-made cruelty and the unforgiving laws of nature. Lenzi's camera is notoriously invasive, capturing the physical decay and desperation of the characters with a cold, voyeuristic precision that defines the survival or porn aesthetic. The film obsesses over the vulnerability of the human body, depicting the characters in a constant state of exposure and physical trauma. Every frame is saturated with the humidity of the swamp and the grime of the jungle, making the viewer feel the absolute lack of safety. It pushes the audience to their limit by showcasing the erosion of modesty as a byproduct of extreme survival. The provocation lies in the stark, unflinching way it portrays the body as a mere object of endurance. It is a grueling, visceral experience that remains a definitive example of the era's raw archive, proving that in the heart of the jungle, the only thing more dangerous than the predators is the darkness within the human heart itself. Breaking into the top 3 is the film that arguably started the entire cannibal survival craze of the 70s. Directed by Umberto Lenzi, Man from Deep River is a seminal work that shifted the focus of adventure cinema from heroic exploits to a gritty, voyeuristic study of cultural and physical collision. The story follows a cynical photographer who is captured by a primitive tribe in the Thai jungle. To survive, he must abandon every luxury and belief he once held, eventually integrating into the tribe and adopting their brutal, elemental way of life. This is not a story of rescue, but a story of transformation through suffering, where the protagonist must become as savage as his environment to see another sunrise. The reason this film sits so high on our list is its uncompromising commitment to the raw archive aesthetic. Lenzi captures the jungle with a grainy, documentary-like coldness that makes every frame feel like a piece of forbidden footage. The provocation lies in the relentless focus on the protagonist's body as it adapts to the wild. He is kept in a state of near total exposure, his skin becoming a map of scars, burns, and dirt. The film constantly teases the viewer with scenes that feel uncomfortably intimate, turning the survival process into a carnal ritual. It explores the idea that true survival requires the death of the ego and the return to a purely animalistic state. The camera dwells on the visceral details of tribal life, the hunting, the blood-soaked rituals, and the casual brutality with an intensity that was meant to shock the senses of a modern audience. It creates a disturbing magnetism, throwing the viewer into a world where the rules of civilization have been completely erased. By the time the protagonist fully embraces his new life, the film has successfully convinced the audience that the only way to survive the jungle is to let it consume everything you used to be. It is a foundational text of the genre that proves the most extreme survival stories are the ones that strip you down to your very soul. Number 2. Wildness, 1975. At number 2, we encounter a rare and haunting piece of British survival cinema that trades the tropical jungle for the stark, desolate moors and the brutal isolation of the wilderness. Directed by Don Sharp, Wildness is a psychological thriller that functions as a grim autopsy of human nature when pushed far beyond the breaking point. The story follows a small group of city dwellers whose plane crashes in a remote mountainous region. As they realize that help is not coming, the social hierarchies and moral codes they brought from civilization begin to disintegrate, replaced by a desperate, feverish struggle for dominance and basic resources. It is a film about the nakedness of the soul, where the cold is just as dangerous as the growing madness within the group. The provocation in this film is found in its cold, clinical focus on the degradation of the human form. Unlike the high-energy action of Italian films, Wildness lingers on the slow, agonizing process of starvation and exposure. The characters are systematically stripped, not just of their clothes as they huddle for warmth, but of their humanity. The camera captures the glistening of feverish sweat in the freezing air and the trembling of bodies pushed to their absolute physical limits. It perfectly hits the survival or porn mark by eroticizing the vulnerability of the victims. The lens follows their desperate movements through the brush and their forced, uncomfortable intimacy with an intensity that feels almost predatory. It's a voyeuristic study of suffering that forces the viewer to watch the exact moment when a person stops being a member of society and becomes a desperate animal. The bleak, gray landscape provides no cover, leaving the characters and their darkest impulses completely exposed for the audience to judge. It is a grueling masterpiece of tension that proves survival is often less about the environment and more about the horror we carry inside ourselves. Number 1. Naked Vengeance, 1985. At the pinnacle of our list is the definitive cult classic of the mid-80s survival exploitation scene. Produced and directed by the legendary Sergio H. Santiago in the Philippines, Naked Vengeance is the ultimate fusion of the hunt or be hunted trope and the raw, unfiltered energy of the B-movie archive. The story follows a woman who, after witnessing a horrific crime, is pursued into the deep, unforgiving mountains by a group of ruthless outlaws. Left for dead and stripped of everything, she undergoes a radical transformation, turning the very wilderness that was meant to be her grave into her own lethal hunting ground. This isn't just a survival story. It is a visceral, blood-soaked anthem of endurance and primal retribution. This film takes the top spot because it perfectly encapsulates the provocative survival or provocation aesthetic with zero apologies. The camera is obsessed with the protagonist's physical journey, her movement through the razor-sharp grass, her immersion in the swampy waters, and the way her body becomes a weapon of nature. It leans heavily into the naked and dangerous visual style, utilizing the sweltering Filipino heat to create a film that feels constantly damp, gritty, and intensely physical. The provocation lies in the constant high-stakes vulnerability. The protagonist is often depicted at her most exposed right before she strikes with her most lethal force. Santiago's direction turns the survival process into a high-octane spectacle, where the camera lingers on every scrape and every bead of sweat with a focus that is both cinematic and voyeuristic. It captures the raw essence of the era, a time when cinema wasn't afraid to be dirty and uncomfortable to tell a story of human resilience. It is the crowning achievement of the genre, proving that when everything is taken away, the only thing left is a pure, unadulterated instinct to survive at any cost. This is the raw archive at its most explosive, leaving no doubt that in the world of survival cinema, the most dangerous prey is the one who has nothing left to lose. These films were more than just a test of the actor's endurance. They were a test of our own boundaries as viewers. The era of survival exploitation was a time when the camera didn't blink, showing us the human body and soul in their most vulnerable, naked states. It was a period that blurred the line between cinematic art and raw provocation, leaving us to wonder, where does the story end and the voyeurism begin? If you want to dive deeper into the forbidden archives of the 60s and 70s, make sure to check out our previous investigations into the world of cult cinema. There is still much to uncover in the dark corners of film history. Which of these survival nightmares would you dare to watch until the end? Let us know in the comments below. Don't forget to like this video if you appreciate the raw history of the silver screen, and subscribe to join us for our next journey into the unseen. Until next time, keep exploring. And remember, in the wild, the only rule is survival.